Let's dive into the meditations. So one thing to note at the outset is that a good way to read the meditations is to try to carry out the process of thinking and reflecting that Descartes describes in your own case. So what he says that he himself is doing, how he's thinking, you want to say, well, how could I think in the same way? Or sort of follow through the steps of his process of thinking in your own thought. And you can ask questions as you go, like, does this make sense? Does, do I think this way of thinking about things is well justified or well motivated? But you do want to, I think, kind of practice what he's describing in your own person as you read. Meditation 1 starts out as follows. And what I've done here is I've simply copied and pasted the paragraph, the first paragraph on the screen. And I'll be going through this text in a fair bit of detail in these lectures. So I may actually read through a number of the paragraphs verbatim, that is, just reading the words exactly as they're written, and pause to explain the different passages. So here's how the meditation starts. Several years have now passed since I first realized, this is Descartes, of course, saying this, since I first realized how numerous were the false opinions that in my youth I had taken to be true, and thus how doubtful were all those that I had subsequently built upon them. So what he's describing here is having a number of opinions, a great many opinions that have been acquired at different times in one's life, okay? Even from, when he was young. But that he gradually realized some of those opinions were false. So various opinions that he acquired, he later realized, look, I really shouldn't believe that. That's not true, okay? And this pattern of believing things, really believing them, but then later finding out they're false and abandoning them, and then believing new things, but finding out those are false and abandoning them. That pattern has led him to doubt anything that, to doubt any belief that was based upon those beliefs that are themselves now known to be doubtful or incorrect. So Descartes goes on to draw a conclusion. He says, and thus I realized that once in my life I had to raze everything to the ground and begin again from the original foundations if I wanted to establish anything firm and lasting in the sciences. So the word raze here, R-A-Z-E, means basically demolish, destroy, destroy to the point where it's just rubble, right? It's brought down all the way to its foundations. R-A-Z-E is very different from R-A-I-S-E, which sounds the same but means the opposite in a way, because it means bringing things up. Raze means destroy all the way down to the ground. So what he's saying here is that if he wants to be confident in what he believes, and he realizes that all the opinions he's acquired up to this point are doubtful, that they could be false, many of them have turned out to be false, what he really needs to do is destroy everything that's uncertain and start again from the beginning just with something certain. Okay, so that's what he says he needs to do. Once in his life, he needs to just toss everything that is not known to be correct and start from something certain. So notice that the way that Descartes is thinking about his beliefs here is with a kind of architectural metaphor. He's imagining his beliefs as a kind of building where some are built on other beliefs lower than them. And if you think about it, that's kind of probably a pretty reasonable way to think about a lot of our beliefs, because we don't believe, the things we believe aren't completely disconnected from one another. Some of them are based on other things we believe. And so he's sort of imagining, look, we have this kind of edifice of beliefs, this whole structure of beliefs that's built from some basic beliefs upward. And what he wants to do is kind of, at least once in his life, critically investigate that structure and destroy everything that's not certain to get down to something that's absolutely certain. And then he describes that he was worried about doing this, that it might be disruptive to other aspects of his life. And you might think, yeah, maybe it would be. I mean, it'd be hard to question everything you believe all the time. But he says, I felt like I needed to do it at some point, and this is a good time in my life. I've sort of reached a point where I have the adequate amount of leisure time, and I can sort of devote myself to doing this, even though it might take a little bit of time. And the meditations, incidentally, are presented as taking place over 6 days. Each meditation represents his thinking on one day. So it's sort of like, you know, meditation 1 is the first day and meditation 2 is the next, and so on. So he says, I've today suitably freed my mind of all cares, secured for myself a period of leisurely tranquility, and am withdrawing into solitude. He's going to, you know, not be distracted by other things because he's about to do something really important, okay? He needs to be able to focus. And so then he says, at last I will apply myself earnestly and unreservedly to this general demolition of my opinions. And now he describes a bit about what's required to undertake this general demolition of his opinions. He says, to bring this about, I will not need to show that all my opinions are false, which is perhaps something I could never accomplish. Now, I think his reason for saying that must be that if you ask how many opinions do you have, we all have so many opinions. I mean, if I asked you, list all the opinions you have, it's unclear when you would be finished. I mean, it will take you a few days just to do that. So he says, I don't need to show that all my opinions are false, which is perhaps something I could never accomplish. So he thinks maybe it would take even more than a few days to do that. And then to actually show each of them are false, that would be to demonstrate that each of them are false. That requires tremendous amount of research and work and so on. So this is probably why he says it's something that he could never accomplish. But reason now persuades me that I should withhold my assent, no less carefully from opinions that are not completely certain and indubitable than I would from those that are patently false. For this reason, it will suffice for the rejection of all of these opinions if I find in each of them, some reason for doubt. So what Descartes is proposing here is that since he's looking for something absolutely certain on which to base all the rest of his beliefs, if he looks at any particular belief and it's at all uncertain, okay, if he looks at any opinion and finds that maybe he doesn't know that it's false, but he also doesn't know that it's true, okay? Just not knowing that it's true is enough for him to say, I'm going to reject it, okay? Because again, he needs to look for something absolutely certain. So the method that he's proposing here is what's sometimes called Descartes' method of doubt. He's going to look at any individual opinion or belief, any given belief or opinion that he has, and he's going to ask, is there any reason to doubt this? Is there any grounds at all for suspecting that this could be false? And if there is any grounds at all for suspecting it could be false, he's just going to treat it as false, and he's going to suspend belief in it. It's not going to work as something that he can base everything else on, so he's going to demolish it for the time being, since he's trying to, again, raise everything down to the foundations to find out if there's something absolutely certain he can base everything else on. Now, incidentally, one way that I find it helpful to think about this, it's not exactly how Descartes describes it, but I think it very much captures what he has in mind, is to sort of imagine that in addition to our edifice of things that we actually do believe, our sort of architecture, the architecture of our beliefs, or the house that represents all of our beliefs in their structure, imagine that we also have a shelf that we're using for this project of demolishing our beliefs. And the shelf is going to hold all of the beliefs that we're going to suspend belief in. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of take parts of this edifice, the house, the structure of our beliefs. We're going to take parts out whenever they can be doubted, okay? And we're going to place them on this shelf of suspended beliefs. And they'll just sit there. The shelf of suspended beliefs is stuff that we're going to stop believing for the time being. We're going to no longer treat as something that's true. In fact, we're going to treat it as something that's false. We're going to treat it as something that, or as something that at least we don't know, okay, we can't rely on. Because again, we're looking for something in our set of believed beliefs, we're going to try to find out if there's anything in our believed beliefs or anything we could add to our believed beliefs that we could say is absolutely certain and is absolutely known to be true. Okay, so anything that doesn't meet that qualification of being absolutely certain, we're going to put in the suspended beliefs shelf. And we're just going to leave it there, and we're not going to believe it for the time being, and we're going to keep looking until we can find something that we can be absolutely certain of. Descartes goes on to describe another part of his method here. He says, nor therefore need I survey each opinion individually, a task that would be endless. So I mentioned this earlier that if you think about all of the things that we believe, there are just too many for us to consider each of them individually. So he says, rather, because undermining the foundations will cause whatever has been built upon them to crumble of its own accord, I will attack straight away those principles which supported everything I once believed. So the point here is that if he can find beliefs that are relatively low in the belief structure, that are relatively foundational, the kinds of beliefs that all of his other beliefs are based on, and he can find some reason to doubt those foundational beliefs, then that's going to call into question all of the beliefs that are based on them. Okay, so now he's going to look for the kind of foundational beliefs that he has, and he's going to ask whether or not he can doubt those, whether or not there's some reason for doubting those. And if there is any reason for doubting them, he's going to suspend them, and that is going to essentially demolish everything that is built on those foundational beliefs.